And we can't have a society in which we have suicide prevention and suicide assistance side by side on offer. It's becoming said that when you contact the government in Canada, it's press 1 for suicide assistance and press 2 for suicide prevention. That's not going to save lives. This is not only detrimental for moments of crisis and vulnerability, such as you've highlighted, it actually sends a social message through the entire society, to every generation, to every demographic. That's why this actually makes all of us more precarious and more insecure about our being here. That's not okay. We have to push back. We have to have more to offer people. This is so inadequate. And I'm convinced that requests for euthanasia don't really express a desire to die so much as they betray some disappointment with the system, a disappointment with lack of resources.
This show is sponsored by shopveteran.ca and the Canadian Legacy Project. Are you a veteran who owns a business? If so, register your business for free on shopveteran.ca, or if you would like to support veteran-owned businesses, be sure to make shopveteran.ca your first stop shop. Thanks, everybody. Hello, all you beautiful souls. Thank you for joining me for another edition of Operation Tango Romeo, the Trauma Recovery Podcast. For my longtime listeners, you know that years ago, I was the guy that cracked the story on medical assistance to dying being offered to veterans directly from Veterans Affairs Canada. I was called a liar and a kook and all kinds of other names. But eventually, the same people that were calling me a liar, maybe it's my demeanor, maybe it's my cheery face, but they started to come around and they would just listen to me because I wouldn't snipe back. I wouldn't flap my arms and call people names. I would just talk to them, say, look, here's what's going on. Here's what you think, but here's what actually happened. And it took probably 2 years from when I broke that story originally before people started to come around and go, oh my goodness, it's true. It wasn't a one-off. It wasn't what the government said. How about that? Sometimes the government doesn't tell you the truth. What a shock. But what the government said is that it was just one veteran. It's how the story started. There was just one veteran by one service agent at Veterans Affairs Canada, and they stuck to that like glue until I had a whistleblower come on who was another veteran. And then they changed the story, said, okay. It's still just one service agent, but now it's 4 veterans. Okay. Still one service agent, but now it's 8 veterans. And they kept changing the story and the goalposts kept moving. Well, I proved without a shadow of a doubt that it was policy at Veterans Affairs Canada. It was policy because I proved at least 5 different veteran service agents. If there's 5, then it was all of them. It's really simple. But that was the experience that I had. Even though I got a pretty good reputation within the veteran community, people called me a liar. On the show today, I got Amanda Achtman. And people like calling her names too, I including with recent posts that I've seen. And I think that's where we're going to start. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So you've been at this for a while. What was the impetus for you to step into this space, to put your hand up and go, hey, medical assistance to dying is probably not a great idea? What was the start for you?
One of the most simple points of departure was the experience I had living with my own grandfather. He moved in with our family in his late 80s to his early 90s. And I was just in high school and my early university years at the time that he was quite elderly. And so he was living with us. And it was in those years that the government started talking about MAID, medical aid in dying, euthanasia, just for people whose deaths are reasonably foreseeable. And I remember growing up, my mom would say every time we took a family photo, this could be your last photo with your grandfather, so get into the photo and kind of be cooperative. And he kept living his long life. And thankfully, he died a natural death at age 96. But it was really hearing about that reasonably foreseeable criterion that made me think, oh, they're talking about people like my grandfather. And so this wasn't just an abstract policy idea, it concerned people like him and families like mine. And I could see the risk of dehumanization of, first and foremost, the elderly, and also older people who are likely to suffer um, all kinds of things at end of life. And I thought, wow, I had seen his susceptibility to kind of not wanting to live or wondering what he was still doing here, as is common among older people. Why hasn't God taken me yet? Or could I just get on with it? I feel like my life is over and things like this. We hear these things. And so it doesn't surprise me so much that older people speak this way, but what ought to surprise us and what ought to make us have pause is when a whole society concedes and capitulates to what is basically a form of suicidal ideation that is now increasingly uh, there among entire demographics of people within our communities. So I would say, I mean, it's a very basic story, and there are many, many other things that cultivated in me an ethical sensitivity, but even something as simple as that was enough to rouse my conscience.
There's a lot of misinformation out there. The only thing that people seem to be aware of is track one MAID. And I know that you're against all of it, but most people are okay with track one MAID, but are completely oblivious to track two. So could you explain what track one and track two is and how those goalposts have been moving on track two?
Sure. So when Canada legalized euthanasia nationwide in 2016, it was restricted to those who were at end of life. The criteria was kind of vague because you had to have a grievous and irremediable condition, kind of according to your subjective viewpoint, and your death had to be reasonably foreseeable. Now, some jurisdictions would stipulate that that would have to mean 6 months or 12-month prognoses, but Canada didn't put any such timeline in. They just said reasonably foreseeable. So that was track one, and that was what we had for the first years in Canada. But then what happened was in 2021, euthanasia was expanded to people with disabilities and to people whose sole underlying uh, diagnosis is a mental illness. I'll be very precise here. I was working in politics at the time. I was working in the office of a member of parliament trying to prevent this expansion. We put out a call for stories and we received hundreds of personal stories of people begging us and imploring us not to allow this expansion, and saying that had this been in place when they were going through their crisis, then they wouldn't be here anymore. And so what happened, though, is euthanasia got expanded, as it always needs to, on the grounds of equality. Because if euthanasia is deemed reasonable for those track one cases, for people in certain circumstances of physical suffering, well, then the rationale is that there are people who suffer as much, if not more, with chronic illnesses, disabilities, or neurological conditions throughout life. And so the criteria was expanded to include those demographics. But then the rationale was expanded even, it was applied even further, that there are people who suffer psychologically and mentally even more, if not as much, as people who suffer physically. So then, as a matter of equality, the government expanded it on these bases. Now, it was Parliament that was saying we're going to expand it to persons with disabilities with Bill C7, and the Senate thought that doesn't go far enough. We have to also expand it to people whose sole underlying condition is a mental illness. And so on March 17th, 2021, Bill C7 passed, doing both things, including um, the expansion of euthanasia on the basis of disability and mental illness as a sole condition. But for the mental illness as a sole condition piece, there was a sunset clause, meaning that it would not take effect for 2 years in order to, in the government's words, get ready for psychiatric euthanasia, as if we could ever be prepared or ready for such a thing. Well, after those 2 years were nearly up, there were calls from psychiatrists across the country and also internationally that helped put the brakes on that. And thankfully, it did not take effect. It was delayed by another year. and then it was delayed again, so that right now the law is set to be implemented. Again, the law passed in 2021. The law fully passed in 2021. It's simply the implementation that has been delayed. And unless there is an act of legislation to change it, we will have psychiatric euthanasia in Canada on March 17th, 2027. So this is a very, very urgent priority this year for groups, for individuals to speak out and to support every effort to prevent this from ever being implemented in our country.
And this is where my show comes in. Since 2019, I've been scouring the globe looking for a better mousetrap for mental health supports. Operation Trauma Recovery. That's what Tango Romeo stands for.
Mm.
The reason my show exists is because the system sucks. The efficacy of mental health supports within the system aren't great. The OSI clinic, the Operational Stress Injury Clinic, where they send us, only has a success rate somewhere between 12 and 16%. And that depends on what you mean by success. So that's their own numbers, which are probably fluffed up. It's probably not even 12 to 16%. So the thought is, well, if we can't help you, let's just kill you. It's disgusting. For the people that listen to my show, I have found numerous modalities, well past that way out past the outpace the system. 12 to 16% is not what you're stuck with. All kinds of modalities, including I just had on the show the other day, Colonel Richard Pucci. And there's Ambio Life Sciences with Ibogaine, and all kinds of modalities of 40, 50, 60%, 70, even 80% success rates. And some of them are actually available, but you've got to look for them. So they're all on my show. I have found them. I bring them on. They talk about the studies to say, yes, this is the efficacy. This is the efficacy rate. Healing happens. It does happen, but the system can make you feel hopeless because the system doesn't work very well. Any of the progress that I've made with my own mental health, and I attempted suicide in 2021. So I've been all the way up and down the ladder as far as mental health. The bottom of the ladder is attempting suicide. And what people don't understand is that they're not all suicide attempts are created equal. They're not all for the same reasons, and they don't follow the same pathology. Myself, like so many others that I've known, I had no intention of ending my life. I just wanted to open my wrist to see what it felt like. It was a mental break. I just come unglued because I was in a state of complete overwhelm. Too much was hitting me from too many directions all at the same time, and the weight was too much, and my brain broke for an afternoon. Point being, it was temporary. It was a temporary state of being, and I survived it. It was nothing short of an actual miracle. And for the atheists out there, sorry, but it was a miracle. My skin would not break, and my knife was sharp. It was a temporary state. Sometimes that temporary state can last a couple of months, but then it passes. Suicidal ideation used to rule my life. It was the first thing I thought of in the morning and the last thing I thought of at night. And if the government is pushing this and saying, hey, here's a viable option, well, then that's a hell of a seed to plant. If the government's like, hey, just keep going, just keep pushing, we'll find a way, we will help you. Well, that's another seed to plant. So which one do you think is right? To encourage people to just give up and die, or to encourage people to keep pushing, push through, and find a way to heal? I think that anything other than encouragement is disgusting. But the advocates of MAID are like, oh no, as soon as you have a problem, just give up. just give up and just die and let the government kill you. Have you been able to make sense of that mentality at all, Amanda?
It's a complete contradiction. You're right to point out that these are completely rival perspectives. And we can't have a society in which we have suicide prevention and suicide assistance side by side on offer. It's becoming said that when you contact uh, the government in Canada, it's press one for suicide assistance and press two for suicide prevention. That's not going to save lives. This is not only detrimental for moments of crisis and vulnerability, such as you've highlighted, it actually sends a social message through the entire society, to every generation, to every demographic. That's why this actually makes all of us more precarious and more insecure about our being here. That's not okay. We have to push back. We have to have more to offer people. This is so inadequate. And I'm convinced that requests for euthanasia don't really express a desire to die so much as they betray some disappointment with the system, a disappointment with lack of resources. I met a young Ukrainian refugee, and I was telling her a little bit about my work. First of all, she was floored that we have euthanasia in Canada, and then she said, "Well, how much does it cost to be euthanized?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't cost anything. It's a public health care." And she said, "You mean to say that I have to pay for my therapy, but the government would kill me for free?"
I've never thought of that.
Therapy is expensive, regular counseling, and this occurred to a woman in her young 20s in a second. What do we make people pay for? And what do we roll out the red carpet for? How long do people have to wait for psychiatric support when they have the offer of same day euthanasia if they're track one? I actually heard a story of a woman. She presented this publicly in front of everyone at an event. This woman was very, very depressed um, and struggling with suicidal ideation, and she learned about MAID and she started to inquire about it. And she had been trying for many months to get help, but she was meeting wait lists that were impossible, and she had reached the end of her ability to wait. She contacted one of these so-called MAID care coordination hubs, and they got back to her right away. She was so spooked at the alacrity of this response that she gave it up. She said, "Something is amiss. If I have tried every avenue to get a psychiatrist and I can't, but they offer this to me the next day, they're getting back to me by email, something's wrong." So thank goodness that actually shook her to the point of giving it up, and she's still alive and she was able to share that story.
You can get
I know
made
you're
faster than a Happy Meal.
yeah, you're and what do we lose? Who are we losing in the midst of all of this? That's something you're sensitive to, and I thank you for that. We have to be so attentive to the people we risk losing due to this uh, posture of defeat, due to this acceptance of defeat. It is so antithetical to everything that would ennoble a people and make us feel proud and patriotic. It is demoralizing. It is a defeat. It is not autonomy. It is not control. It is a defeat.
That's how I see it too. It's if we can't help you, we can kill you. And there's this clip of somebody outside of a psychiatrist convention, 06, 09, somewhere around there, and asked a simple question: how many people have you cured? And people just start to laugh or they're uncomfortable. And one person who's been doing it for 30 years says, well, maybe one. But most of the answers were nobody ever. And other psychiatrists that I've talked to or I've heard speak that had to leave the profession because all they do is write scripts all day and they say, I help nobody. I see them for 15 minutes, they get a script, and that's it. And psychiatric medications like SSRIs have never been proven beyond uh, to work beyond the placebo effect, and yet that's the go-to for so many people. All the modalities that I've uncovered that works so much better. Simple supports as much as diet. Change your diet, get into ketosis, get rid of artificial dyes. Just so many simple things that help a lot of people. Now I've thrown the kitchen sink at it, and I've had some good progress. I still have my dark days, but healing happens. Just the system is not great for it. It's starting to catch up, though. Ibogaine treatments across Texas, Tennessee, Virginia, and other states are coming online, and the Ibogaine clinics are swamped. They're booked like a year, 2 years in advance, kind of thing. So that's good. That demand, and it's just at the beginning. It's the early adopter phase. Hopefully that comes up to Canada too. I'll be pushing for it. There's many that are, but at the end of the day, healing happens. There is hope. What are some of the biggest myths that people believe that support MAID? So, like, of the people that are pounding their fists and going, bodily autonomy is everything. Um, what are some of the things that you think they just got wrong, but they swear is right?
Yeah, I think walk into the hospital and see if you could imagine the slogans of the euthanasia proponents being plastered on the walls or even being spoken in the corridors. Autonomy and control are not a match for the experiences, the eminently human experiences of suffering and dying. And yes, there's a lot of fear driving those desires to have a kind of mastery over suffering. But what I try to emphasize, especially lately, is that like euthanasia is a form of self-harm. Why don't
Of
we speak
course,
about it as self-harm?
it is suicide.
Yeah, it's suicide and it's self-harm insofar as it also has the same motivation as those who self-harm when it's not about um those who self-harm are trying to put into control an out of control situation. It's an attempt of mastery and conquest when life seems out of control or when there's no sense of self and that integration is breaking down. And it's very similar with older people in particular, or people who are suffering, who feel like they've lost everything. They've lost the ability to do meaningful activities, as they say, um, because the government keeps data on the main kinds of reasons people request MAID. And the main reasons are not actually due to physical pain or suffering, they're much more existential. The number one kind of suffering people list is inability to do meaningful activities. The next one is inability to do the daily activities of personal care. And then autonomy and dignity, independence, and sort of existential fear. Those are all above pain and the fear of pain in the rankings by people's own admission going for euthanasia of why they're requesting it. So this is a really existential phenomenon. It's really about our response to suffering and our capacity or incapacity to make meaning out of suffering, loss, grief, trauma. So we have a lot of work to do because even if euthanasia was illegal tomorrow, we'd still have a lot of these same factors. And so that's why I think this is such a broader cultural conversation, and we all have a piece of the puzzle. You very much know your space in all of this. We all have a piece to tackle because this is a massive cultural shift that affects every profession and every demographic. So, yeah, we have our work cut out for us.
So every time one of these posts go up and they get shared, um, in particular the recent one where you posted an interview with that grandmother who was offered MAID and it was pushed on her. Um, the comments are of disbelief. They're saying, no, that's not true. That's not how the system works. Doctors do not offer MAID. You have to ask for it, but it is never pushed on you. What's your experience with that? And name as many names as you can as examples.
Sure. So Miriam Lancaster is one of the women I met during a speaking tour I recently did on Vancouver Island. And Vancouver Island is really a hotspot for this. So I was traveling all across and engaging different audiences on these topics. And she's one of the last ones I met, actually. And after my talk, she shared with me about how she was offered euthanasia basically upon arrival to the hospital. She was in a great deal of pain one day. Her daughter called the ambulance. She gets to the Vancouver General Hospital, and as she says, this young female doctor comes over and says, "We would like to offer you MAID." Now, she seemed in distress. She was elderly, and she was pitched on a premature end to her life before she had even had an x ray, before she had known anything about what was wrong with her. She said that was the furthest thing from her mind. She just wanted to find out what was at issue. And well, she did find out what was at issue. She recuperated nicely enough, as she says. And then she went on to travel to Mexico, Cuba, and Guatemala shortly after this time in the hospital. And so she shared that story with me, and I said, "Miriam, that's really something. Would you be willing to just say it on camera?" And she said, "Sure, I don't see why not." And so we stepped into a side room and I recorded her. She was very natural and she shared her story. I uploaded it a couple weeks after having met her. I uploaded it actually the day that I was in Alberta, because Alberta was bringing in their laws to limit euthanasia to some extent. And so I was at the legislature for that occasion. And I thought that's a good day to post Miriam's video. So I shared it and immediately was met with, as you've alluded to, disbelief, incredulity. People were saying, "Oh, this is an AI generated video." Who could even come up? It's such a specific story. It's so obviously a genuine account. But people were accusing that it was fake, that it was generated. Someone said that I gave her a script to read. This is her own account. This is her own story. This is a 1 minute video that I recorded personally on my phone at the end of a speaking event because she shared an anecdote with me that I thought more people should hear. It went super viral and has hundreds of thousands of views, and lots of media picked it up, including People, the New York Post, the Daily Mail. She was on the cover of the National Post one Saturday morning. It was picked up by tons and tons of additional outlets beyond that. And it was also translated into several other languages too, because the world is paying attention and the world trusts the testimony of an 84-year-old woman with a story to tell. Now, all of those detractors who are saying, "Oh, this seems suspicious and this seems like there's an agenda behind it," well, there are more families coming forward with very similar stories. And as you and I were discussing earlier, how many is it going to take? How many would you really like to hear in order to believe the truth that this is happening?
Do you
And
have
some
a running count of how many people had a similar experience to Miriam?
I don't have a similar count. I have more anecdotes, and I'm sure more could come forward. I think they will be coming forward to media because City News Vancouver did an additional story about this family that expressly said they came forward because of Miriam's story. And some people are saying, "Well, why didn't she go report it right away?" It wasn't on her mind to report the doctor, and there's no reason to report in this climate because what the doctor did was not illegal.
And
There's no prohibition.
report to who?
And report what? There's no violation of the policy. There is no prohibition against raising euthanasia with any eligible person. None. That was attempted as a safeguard during committee hearings, and it was struck down as a. And so you can see if you search the document, very easy to find. Bringing Up MAID, put out by the Canadian Association of MAID Providers and Assessors. This is the group that is government funded to promote euthanasia within Canada. And the document is a PDF titled Bringing Up MAID. And the summary text says that there's no prohibition against raising MAID with eligible patients. And by the way, not everyone will know this is a legal option in Canada. And so you would do well to raise it. And the document goes on to explain all the circumstances and approaches for raising euthanasia with patients, with anyone who is eligible. And so while I was on the island, the same trip, this is just a brief stint that I had to the island, I met another woman named Muriel. And Muriel, up island, she told me that she and her husband were both offered MAID while he was at the end of his life. And they said, no, thank you. And then, after her husband's death, she was diagnosed with terminal cancer and given 6 months to live. Well, her cancer specialist offered her MAID, and she, when I met her, was 10 months. It had been 10 months since the diagnosis. So she outlived the prognosis, which frequently happens because doctors predict terminal prognoses incorrectly about half of the time. And doctors can predict maybe death within hours or days, but not within months or years. And then a third time, she was dealing with her husband's death and burial. And when she was at the funeral home, they offered it to her too. And funeral homes, some of them in Canada, will very candidly offer MAID and offer a space to do it on site. Like, these are not things that you need to do secret undercover investigative reporting on. They're completely transparent. They're in the light because there's no violation, there's no prohibition against them. And so I really would stress that all these people who are saying, well, people should complain, people should name names, why? These elderly people still need to receive care by these physicians. And by all other accounts, once they express that they have no interest in euthanasia, they can receive some degree of care. But who wants to be cared for by someone who, moments earlier, suggested that you could perhaps be dead instead? And like, this is shattering to people. I think that it's really demeaning and demoralizing of people's sense of worth, but not everyone wants to talk about it. I want to mention briefly, because this is significant. I had recorded a short clip of Muriel. It's also posted on my X account. She's the first one I met up island. She shared her story about those 3 offers of euthanasia. I had not posted the video, but I shared it at my talk in Victoria, and Miriam saw it. So she knew what I meant when I said, could you be in a 1-minute video sharing your story? Because Miriam saw Muriel's story, she spoke. Because this additional family saw Miriam's story, they spoke to City News Vancouver.
That's
That's
how it
why.
happened to me too.
Exactly. There's gonna, and as you saw, more and more come forward. And if you want, you can explain why people didn't immediately come forward right away, because I'm sure they face the same accusations and the same allegations. Well, why didn't you speak? Why didn't you report earlier? You've seen the same structure.
And I had trouble believing it at first too. I mean, it actually took me 2 years to really wrap my head around it, even though I was in 40 different newspapers and I was the front page twice of the National Post, all about this. And it still took me a couple of years to really accept that this is what it is. So when I call him veteran number 1 because he simply doesn't allow his name to come out, and I've always respected that. I've never said his name, but he knew me because of my show, so he sends me 2 audio files, and I didn't listen to them right off the bat because people send me stuff all the time. But frog in my throat today. He texts me a couple days later, hey, have you listened to those files yet? Oh, crap, I haven't. So I listened to the first one and I couldn't bloody believe it. It was an apology call from Veterans Affairs Canada apologizing to him for one of the service agents offering him MAID. And the second one was the follow-up call to that. But they were apologizing for pushing MAID on him when he was just asking for help. He was asking for help with a traumatic brain injury and looking for possible treatments. And they said, well, have you considered just dying? We can help you with that. So I had trouble believing it, even though I heard those 2 audio files, which I still have. I just can't publish them because I don't have his permission. which bums me out, but there you go. Um, and then another one comes forward because it saw my original testimony in Ottawa, and he went by the pseudonym Bruce, and I had him on the show doing saying how it happened to him. But then we have people that actually use their names, like Christine Gauthier. She was offered medical assistance in dying by Veterans Affairs twice. David Baltzer was offered medical assistance in dying unprovoked as well. Wasn't asking about it, wasn't inquiring about it. He was asking for help with PTSD recovery. And they said, okay, now don't freak out, but just to consider, just so you know, it's an option. Our success rate's really low. So if you're feeling like maybe the end would be better, we can facilitate medical assistance to dying for you. Now, how many times does this have to happen before you realize, well, this was policy? Of course, the government swears on a stack of Bibles that it wasn't policy, but quite clearly it must have been. There's no other explanation for it. That so many different veterans from different provinces, and if you're in a different province, means you have different service agents. It was absolutely policy. And it seems like it's really a way of being a budget cut. David Menzies asked me if I thought it was a budget cut. And when he asked me that, um, I thought that was just a bridge too far at that time. But now I'm there. I've seen it so many times, and yeah, it's a budget cut. That and some weird, crazy death cult, maybe. But it seems like it's a budget cut. What I wanted to ask you, Kelsey Sharon, when she was on with Dr. Jordan Peterson, talked about the actual process of MAID, of which there's at least two that I know of. And the way that she was describing it, and I'd like you to correct the record on this or affirm it, whichever it is, that first you're given a paralytic so that you can't move. They did that because so many people were going into wild convulsions and it was anything but a peaceful death. So they give you a paralytic so you can't convulse, and then they give you something else. And then slowly over the course of 6 or 8 hours, your lungs fill full of fluid and you drown slowly, but you're paralyzed. So you can't express any discomfort. I can't think of, that's like being buried alive, only worse. Like you're slowly drowning by waterboarding, and you're paralyzed, so you can't show any reaction to it. If that's accurate, I can't think of a more hellish way to go. What's the truth? Like, how does it actually work?
It's true that there are 3 drugs that are administered, and Dying with Dignity is very transparent about this, about what they are and about how they work as a paralytic, a sedative, and then to stop the heart. And these drugs are used in other contexts, which is why Dying with Dignity says they're relatively innocuous. Although in this context, they are overdoses. They are used in extreme amounts that are lethal and that amount to a lethal injection. As for the experience of the person undergoing it, we don't have a lot of evidence. And as Kelsey has said, the dead don't talk. As physicians have told me, we simply don't know enough to be able to ascertain the inner experience of someone undergoing it. And yet, it's true that because of the way that they are sedated and paralyzed, it may appear peaceful to onlookers and bystanders, and yet we have no idea the effect psychologically and physiologically for the person, him or herself. And we know that when given the option of how to be executed, we are hearing stories more and more from the US of uh, people on death row opting for a different means of execution than lethal injection. That is how much it is repudiated, even by death row prisoners. And yet, this has become normalized and romanticized, even glamorized, as an ideal way to die in Canada, to the extent that 1 in 20 deaths in Canada is a result of a doctor or nurse giving a lethal injection. Now, some listening might say, well, come on, there must be some cases. And if they raise it themselves and you create limits to those at the end of life, or the thing is, though, you can't really narrow the criteria because we can't have it both ways. Either some either euthanasia is a reasonable means to address suffering by killing the one who suffers, or it's not. We can't just have a little bit of euthanasia because the whole view animating it has a particular view of its legitimacy. And if it's legitimate, it has to be legitimate for more and more demographics. Like if it's a good thing, you can't restrict it. If it's a bad thing, you can and you ought to restrict it. But we really have to come to some decision points as a country on this, because right now we have really an irreconcilable tension between our suicide assistance and suicide prevention efforts.
Has there been even a single case of somebody undergoing MAID while having an EEG hooked up to them at the same time? I just had an EEG. I had a neurological event last summer that I'm having looked at, trying to figure it out. But I mean, they can tell what's going on in your head uh, just by putting a bunch of electrodes on you. So has that been done even once?
I've not heard of that.
Well, that would do it. I mean, it's pretty simple. Do it through an EEG or some other means, and then they can tell the internal state of the person that's undergoing the process, and then you can see firsthand if it's actually peaceful or if they're going through the worst type of hell that anybody could possibly imagine. When my dad passed 3 years ago, um, he refused a treatment on the cancer because it was already too far. He was 84, a lifetime smoker. And so he went by basically drowning slowly, the worst way I can imagine to go. I'd rather burn alive than drown for 5 hours. Um, but when it finally got to the time where he was uh, almost gone at the beginning of the death process, it was left up to me to say, okay, Dad, we're here now. What we can do is because he was on the maximum amount of oxygen for it to work. Like you wouldn't have wanted to light a match in that room for sure. But and I said to him, "Well, this is it. We're about to apply this medicine to you, Dad. That's going to make you feel comfortable. I've had this medicine before for a transesophageal echocardiogram. So it's when they jam a camera down your throat so they can do an echocardiogram from the inside out instead of the outside in to check out your heart. So I've had this medicine, and you don't mind this thing. Like you're still kind of awake, but you're sort of conscious, but you just don't mind the discomfort. Like it's very tolerable to have this camera get shoved down your throat and moved around. So I knew it's called ramdazalam or something like that. I know I have that wrong, but to me it sounds like ramdazalam. Um, but I explained this to him, and I said, "So you're going to lose your ability to speak, though, Dad. So what are the last three words, or what are the last things that this is it? Like whatever you got to say it now." And he said, "I love you, I love you, I love you." And I think that was for me, my sister, and my mom. We got one each, and and then they gave him the magic juice, um, and seemed pretty peaceful. And I waited until I was sure that those drugs were in him before we turned down the oxygen and leaned him back. So he drowned. That's what finished him off finally. And I'm just hoping that slow drowning, because it took him 3.5 hours, 3.5 hours before he finally did the death throes and he was done. Um, Now, I haven't stopped thinking about, oh my Lord, what if there wasn't enough of that drugs in there, or those drugs didn't work and he just couldn't react. And I just, because we tilted him back He could only breathe when he was tilted up. We tilted him back and turned the oxygen almost all the way off. We turned it down to a minimum. We could have just unplugged it entirely. Would probably have been a little bit quicker. But what if he did suffer? I have no way to know. But that's if that's what we're doing with MAID, I can't think of a worse way to go.
It's painful to think about these kinds of memories and to kind of rehash them. And the prevalence of euthanasia makes it so much worse because most families want the best for their loved ones. You wanted to love him well to the end and to take the measures that would make him as comfortable as possible in circumstances that are really painful and difficult and truly end of life. What happens with euthanasia now is death is scheduled. And if you already have tasted the powerlessness of losing someone, the powerlessness of death being scheduled to the minute is so much infinitely worse. It's so different and it's so shattering. Sometimes I share a story of having a chat with an Uber driver who told me that he thought that his father was the ideal candidate for MAID if ever there was one. Stage 4 terminal cancer, and his mother supported it, his brothers agreed, and so this man, my Uber driver's father, was going to be euthanized in the living room, and he thought that he was the kind of person for whom this existed. But then this Uber driver told me, I have to tell you though, it's the most effed up thing in the world knowing that your father is going to die in 15 minutes, then 10 minutes, then 5 minutes, and you're powerless. But also that it's been decided. There's a great difference between accepting natural death, which doesn't mean accepting death without any interventions. No, we can do all kinds of interventions, and palliative care and medicine should be cutting edge and top notch. People deserve that. That's natural death. There's a great difference between allowing natural death and even withdrawing extraordinary measures versus the direct intentional killing of a person. Everything comes down to the intention there. Some people might say, oh, these acts seem so similar. The result seems the same. But the intention counts for a lot. The intention counts for a lot, and it actually changes the nature of the act. People deserve to be loved well until the end. And euthanasia, MAID, it's sending them the message, and sometimes they're reinforcingly sending it to themselves, that they could just not be here. It's shattering of self-esteem and of morale. So I realize that these are difficult ethical issues to navigate, and everyone has stories and memories associated with end of life that help shape our views on these things. And I would hope that our experiences and the way that we share them, as you do through this show, and as hopefully everyone listening will be encouraged to do, hopefully it helps us cast our sights higher to a more noble and courageous way of suffering and dying, because we are losing our resilience and we are losing our expectation of what is possible. And euthanasia is lowering and degrading the quality of healthcare, the possibilities of treatments. If, for example, so many people with cancer or dementia or ALS are opting for MAID, can't we see how that makes getting a diagnosis of any of those things much more fearful? It becomes more fearful, and so I say I am actually more afraid of fitting the government's criteria for MAID than I am of getting any diagnosis.
Well, and it
because
seems like it's anybody for any reason.
yeah,
There's the one, and correct me if I'm wrong. If I recall, when I was talking with Nicole Scheidel some time ago, that there was a man in his early 20s on Vancouver Island who was deaf. That's it. But because being deaf is unremedial or irremedial, he qualified, and they killed him. Are you familiar with that case?
yes, I think that's Alan Nichols.
Okay. And did I get that roughly right?
Yeah, and even more recently, we have the story of Keanu Vifayan. He's the 26-year-old who, because of diabetes and blindness, was euthanized just before the new year and just before his 27th birthday. Now, he was mainly depressed because of the diabetes and blindness, and he applied for MAID when he was 22. An Ontario doctor had initially approved him, I think over FaceTime or something, like not even in person. And then, because he was struggling with his sight, his family saw his email. They were helping him with his emails, and they saw that he had an email basically uh, moving along his MAID application, and so they were able to go to the media and to kind of intercept it. And his mother was featured in a whole kind of news story about it. And for some years, he lived. And but then more recently, he reached out to a doctor who was notorious for killing like hundreds and hundreds of patients, and he flew out of province to be killed in Vancouver. And so this mother and this sister who I was spending time with just recently, they're shattered by it. And their son and brother was taken from them. He didn't get the support he needed. There are so many others like him. And I think the stories of young people alert the public, the stories of veterans alert the public. Certain stories have more resonance than others.
Oh, wasn't there the most recent one?
All of them.
Somebody that just had seasonal affective disorder and dead. They killed him, and he was like 26. Do you know that story?
This is piano.
Oh, that was the same one.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just seasonal affective disorder; it was also blind and
The reason why he qualified, his so-called qualifying disabilities, were the diabetes and the blindness, because if he was only depressed, that would not have fit the criteria as it stands. But because he had these disabilities, that's why, for example, I could add here that that's why people with disabilities feel so affronted, because if you are depressed and use a wheelchair, you qualify for euthanasia in Canada right now. If you're only depressed, you don't.
the evilness of it, and that people can't see that there's no more slope to slip on, as we were saying earlier. Um, this means that anybody with anything can go. Like there's just no barrier to entry. And how long until it's not voluntary? It's like, well, homeless people, let's just put them through the mill, like Nazi death camp style. And anybody that's a burden on the system, well, maybe we'll give you 3 months to recover. If you don't, we'll kill you. And it'd be like Soylent Green. Like I can see it going that far. Do you think that's crazy, or do you think it could go that far where it's no longer, um, even a choice?
We already have euthanasia without consent because in Quebec, as of October 30th, 2024, there's euthanasia by advance request. And this is in violation of the criminal code. Even the Liberal Justice Minister wrote a letter to Quebec letting them know that they are doing something illegal, but for which the federal government will not uh, prosecute. Basically, it's a policy of death for dementia because upon being diagnosed with dementia, you can make an advance request according to criteria that you lay out, that if your dementia progresses to such an extent, you consent to MAID in advance. And so your current self can bind your future self so irrevocably that they kill you, and that there's no real capacity for a change of mind or change of heart, because you're only seen as really being a person while you have the capacity to consent. Your personhood is reduced to your consenting capacity, and so you have to have enough dementia to qualify to make an advance request, but not so much dementia that you've lost the capacity to consent. This is an erosion of, again, one of those safeguards that had been deemed essential just a few years prior, requiring contemporaneous consent. And this is one of the things that Alberta is preemptively banning and saying we're not going to allow people to be euthanized without being able to consent in the moment of the administration of the lethal injection. So I think that demonstrates, though, we already have euthanasia without consent. Where else are you able to it's just it's a total destruction of the very meaning of consent here.
And just to throw a little color on that, there are interviews from people that jump off the Golden Gate Bridge that survived. And there is one consistency. Every single one of them, the moment they left the bridge, they regretted it. Like they weren't looking forward to it all the way down. Every one of them regretted it the second they let go of that bridge and went, oh shit, what have I done?
Hmm.
So if that's the case so often, how that how can you possibly be bound by a previous decision without then it's no longer consent.
And a lot of it is fear and projection. How many people think if I had a disability, or if I lost my memory, or if this, if that, if I can no longer drive, if I can no longer live independently, then my life is over. It's no longer worth living. A lot
My
of people
mom,
believe
my
these
mom's
things.
been my mom's been alive for the last 4 or 5 years, unable to look after herself. When my dad was alive, he looked after her, but would have to wash her and wipe her and everything else. But she's happy and cheery. Um, she's in assisted living home now, kind of at the limit of what that home is able to provide for her. But she's 5 minutes from my sister, and she's happy. I just visited her on Sunday, and she's a happy lady. Even though she can't look after herself, she does need help. She needs assistance, but she's smiling. She's sharp. Her has a little bit of dementia. It's very light, but she's managing quite well and loves her life and doesn't want to die. But I just learned on Sunday that she's been diagnosed with breast cancer, and we're not sure what her choices are going to be from here forward. But she's 88 years old, and she's at the end of the road. And God, I'm going to miss her. But I have this concern of, well, what if one of the social workers or somebody at the care home starts pushing MAID on her? I haven't even wanted to bring it up because I don't even want to plant that seed. But I also want to make sure that nobody's being predatory and putting this in her head and trying to encourage her to jump off that cliff a little bit sooner than what she has to. It's just, I guess the point of me bringing up my mom is she's happy. She has a good life. She enjoys her life. She enjoys her grandkids, and there's a great grandkid on the way. And she wants to see that great grandchild if she can, you know. Like her life is still worth living, and she's still enjoying it, even though she needs a walker just to go 10 feet and a wheelchair to go any further than that. And she needs help changing her own diapers and whatnot. It doesn't mean she doesn't enjoy her life. She does enjoy her life, but because she's would be a burden on the system if she was publicly funded. Luckily we have just enough to look after her. So so she's in a nice care home. But I have seen interviews of people in hospital where the doctors are like, look, you're a burden, just die. And and like they're pushing MAID, they're badgering people to accept MAID, uh, and because they, like, these have been recorded conversations where you hear the words from the doctor's mouth. Like, it's not just a testimony. You actually hear the doctors badgering this guy in somewhere in Ontario, badgering him to
Roger
just accept
Foley.
MAID. What's
Mm-hmm.
his name?
Roger Foley.
Yeah, Roger Foley. And am I mischaracterizing the Roger Foley story?
Oh, that's it. And he has audio recordings exactly of that pressure. And yeah, he's faced repeated pressure. It does become predatory. And I would say it doesn't hurt to preempt it, to say, this is off the table. Do not offer it. This is not what we are going to do. We don't want to have it even entertained or suggested. I think that's worthwhile because it is a way to protect our loved ones, and many of the physicians in the network with which I'm involved, they really encourage the presence of family members, the vigilance of family members. It makes a difference. You know, it makes a difference in the care that's received when someone is engaged in that person's life, when they're coming by regularly. When people are abandoned, unfortunately, sometimes healthcare workers begin to mimic that abandonment, which is devastating and which nobody deserves. It's just so obvious that it's good your mother exists because she's your mother. And apart from what she can do, you love her because she's your mother and you're her son. We need to revive the sense of value inherent in every relationship. That's love. That we, especially this feeling of being a burden, I think older women in particular, this is the most common thing I hear. They're terrified of burdening their families and others in their lives. And sometimes that makes them consider MAID. And I flip the script and say, nothing would burden your family more than your suicide. Because I hear the stories of the adult children and the adult grandchildren who are racked with guilt and trauma and grief from losing parents and grandparents to this, because it sends the message like that you weren't worth sticking around for. So it is so important that people die naturally. Like this has been put really well by a woman who was dying of cancer, and she made a very moving video in which she says how a story ends changes the meaning of every page. How a story ends changes the meaning of every page. So, what do you want the witness of your life to be? What message do you want to leave people? How you bear your sufferings and how you die sends a message, whether you like it or not, and it concerns more people than just you. That is so, so important, and it's so worthwhile having these conversations well ahead of time. And for someone who is suffering and dying, it's really good to come alongside them in whatever form, maybe not in these words, but to kind of have the posture of, what do you have to teach me? Kind of like with what your dad, when you said, what are the words you want to leave with me? And he tells you, I love you. When we have this posture of waiting to receive what that person has for us, those are the moments of tenderness and beauty that we cherish for the rest of our lives, that stay with us, that come back to us in our minds and hearts for the long run. So we don't want to short circuit the moments of tenderness and intimacy with the people who are closest to us by this premature end.
Well, I have to explain too that it was no small thing to hear the words "I love you" from my dad as his last final words, because he'd only said it once or twice before in his life to
Wow.
me. So
Wow.
this is like the second or third time I'd ever heard it in my entire life. So it meant a lot.
Yeah.
Like it was not trivial.
Mm-hmm.
And so just knowing that that's what mattered to him at the end,
Yeah.
it was a big deal. So I want to talk about power of attorney and how this can fold in. There's a new story of a son protecting his dad in the house, and the RCMP were at the door, pounding on the door, saying, "We're going to take him to get him mated. We're going to take your." I think he's like 96 years old, because the daughter was pushing for it. So the daughter, I think, may have had power of attorney, and like, yeah, just kill him because I want my inheritance. And the police were obliging. So they're at the door, and the son is in there going, no, 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 dad doesn't want to die. Like, he's got a little bit of dementia, but he's fine. And the dad was, he was perfectly, it's like, I'm not going with you. I don't want to get killed. I don't want to be mated. That is not, those are not my wishes. And yet they were there to drag him away, to get to perform MAID on him, to kill him, because that's what the daughter wanted, because uh, just wanted her inheritance and didn't want to wait any longer. So that's a real thing. That was just last week. Have you heard of that story?
I have not watched the video yet, but someone did just send it to me, so I will watch it.
Well, and that's where this is going. Like, if you, is it power of attorney? Is that the right legal instrument that I'm citing?
For the person who's responsible for making healthcare decisions
Yeah,
at end of
power of
life.
attorney.
If you want some more information on how you can legally protect yourself, some of the, and maybe you've had them on your show before, Alex Schattenberg does a lot of work through the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, has some documents in this regard that families can use to protect themselves. There's also the Delta Hospice Society. They've put out some resources, and so you can try these means to protect yourself more legally. I think what we are seeing though is that this is tearing families apart. It's creating massive division in relationships. And I've seen that in a lot of the talks I give. People come up to me and they say, yeah, like I've lost this relationship over MAID. I think this is like, honestly, if we put out a call for stories for that, I bet like it's just so wounding and it's so devastating that people hardly want to talk about it, especially because other family members are implicated and it's already kind of broken them down. But I can tell you that a lot of people come up to me after my talks and they explain that they no longer have relationships with siblings, with other relatives because of end of life decisions concerning MAID. Now, it's already hard enough in even with natural death navigating healthcare decisions and choices in this regard. When you add MAID to it, it's massively disruptive to
Especially
relate.
if there's disagreement. Like, my
Yeah,
sister has power of attorney over mom. Imagine if this comes, like, if that decision is made without my consent or without my input. I mean, that would probably be the end of me and my sister.
right.
Like that, some things are just simply unforgivable, and like, that would just be catastrophic.
Yeah. So,
Amanda, is there anything that we haven't touched on that we should?
oh, well, this is such an infinite topic, but we have covered a lot of things. I would just really encourage people to stay engaged on this topic because it's not going away. This is touching all of us, with 1 in 20 deaths in Canada being the result of euthanasia. Almost everyone has some connection to this issue, even if they haven't talked about it. And so create the openings to have conversations, even about other end of life stories like the ones you've shared involving your parents. It's very healthy to speak about these things. In our very online, very social media, very newsy world, we don't always pay attention to people who are older or suffering at end of life. They're just kind of like peripheral and outside of the um like outside of the social media frenzy and everything. But it's so important that we give voice to people who are at risk of being discarded, dismissed, and discounted. And we know that a lot of people are also having a lot of caregiver burnout because people are living long lives and demand a lot of care. So we need to add more support and insist on better, not only for the people uh, who are patients themselves, but also for families, caregivers, healthcare workers. We have to be more demanding and expect more and not concede and capitulate to this pathetic, low expectation euthanasia regime that is not aspirational, that is not patriotic, that has only made Canada into a cautionary tale to the rest of the world of what not to do. And I am convinced that this is not going to last. It will, historically speaking, be a blip. And so that's one reason why I would strongly encourage people not to opt for MAID. This is not going to last. It's going to be seen as investigative journalist Alexander Rakin put it. He said that in a wonderful piece, in a wonderful interview, he said, "I'm convinced that MAID is going to be regarded like sterilization is now regarded in Canada.
Oh,
Forced
absolutely.
sterilization. Like we're going to look back on this and say, what were we thinking? We weren't thinking." And so I think the good news is that the rest of the world is regarding Canada with horror. And many people in Canada think this is a foregone conclusion and this is the status quo. But I had someone come up to me after one of my talks, an elderly woman. She was almost trembling and she said, "I didn't know there was any resistance. I didn't know there was any counter movement." She said, "You're the first person I've heard who's spoken against this." I was a bit floored by that, but we have to be that counter movement and give people hope that this is not going to last.
Well, for the audience to learn more about this, to hear more stories of people's real life experiences with MAID happening within their families, there's been numerous documentaries that both Amanda and I have been in. MAID in Canada is one of them. What are some of the others, Amanda?
Yeah, I guess there are lots of things to look up. If you want to see the vignettes, the short films that I've released that are 4 or 5 minutes long, including of Roger Foley's stories and some of the children and grandchildren who have lost loved ones to euthanasia, speaking out, other people with disabilities, and a woman with dementia. A beautiful interview with her. Even a woman who decided to get a tattoo that says "Don't euthanize me" right on her arm in her 80s. She decided to get that tattooed once the government legalized it. All of these stories, you can find them at dyingtomeetyou.com. If you have a story you want to share with me, if you just want to sign up to get periodic email updates, it's dyingtomeetyou.com. I try and post different resources there, and the site's going to be expanded very soon. So stay engaged in these topics. Reach out anytime. This is so important.
Amanda is also the ethics director of Canadian Physicians for Life. So you can follow Canadian Physicians for Life on social media. You can follow Kelsey Sharon, who's been a very loud voice about all of this. Any other resources you can point people to get informed about this?
Yep, for Physicians for Life, it's just physiciansforlife.ca. There's a weekly email list if you want to learn more about healthcare and the Hippocratic tradition of do no harm. I've mentioned Alexander Rakin. He's written some excellent studies published by Cardis. One of them is called From Exceptional to Routine. Very good data. And he's also done some kind of exposés of the pro euthanasia groups and what they're saying internally. There's Alex Schattenberg, who has been at this for more than 25 years through the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. You mentioned the work of Kelsey. She's sounding the alarm in a big way. And the Delta Hospice Society, Angelina Ireland. There's the Unveil Studios documentary series about
The Kuman brothers, yes.
Kuman brothers. Yeah, so step by step, more is unfolding here, and there's more to come.
Okay. Amanda, please stay on the line. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks.
Now, for the audience, all I ask of you is to be thoughtful and to try to think, not react. This is a tough subject to talk about. So try your best to focus on what is, not what you wish things would be. If you still think that this is not happening, if you think I'm a liar and Amanda is a liar and all the people that have come forward are liars, maybe watch the documentaries, hear the stories right from the people directly, and just learn, because I've had so many whistleblowers, again, like I like saying their names again and again. Christine Gauthier is not a liar. Kayla Pollock is not a liar. These people are, David Baltzer is not a liar. All people I've had on the show using their full names. These people are not liars. The word grifter keeps coming up. I don't get paid for the show. I have sponsors. Yes, they've paid for the equipment, the camera that I'm looking into right now, my laptop from different sponsors. They've helped. I don't collect a paycheck though. I've been doing this for free for 7 years, over 350 episodes for free. I'm not a grifter and I'm not a liar. So please have an open mind. Look at the facts. Try to divorce yourself from the emotions of this conversation and look at the facts. Yes, some doctors are pushing this in some cases. It is happening, and it's not okay. Thank you for joining me. If you think this was an important episode, an important topic, please share. Share. Thank you for joining us today.